I didn't want my trauma to get the best of me. I didn't want to be a forever victim because of what I experienced as a child. And I really didn't want to have such a shitty adult life, just like I've already had kind of a shitty childhood. And at least with the childhood, I wasn't really in control of what happened. Whereas as an adult, I am fully in control of what happened. Well, of what can happen. Not with everything, of course. There are some things in my life that I have no control over. But at least with myself, my thoughts, my actions, I have a lot more control over my life than what I did as a child, which is the case for a lot of people. A lot of people have almost full control of their life trajectory as they come into adulthood that they didn't necessarily have as a child. And I think for me, as I was going through the process of healing from everything that happened, I was surrounded by quite a few people that were surprised that I wasn't stuck in the boo hoo, poor me mindset. I think it's really prevalent in today's society to hold on to the things that traumatized you or hurt you as an excuse to not make progress. And I saw where that got a couple of people in my life, and I didn't want that to happen to me. But I knew that I had a lot of issues to work through, that if I didn't address them, they would just come back to bite me in the ass, anyways. So I might as well try to get a handle on them now. And I thought I would talk about how I kind of navigated unpacking everything that I went through, making sure I understand how it affected me, and to a certain degree, trying to understand why it even happened in the first place, but then also take the best steps to not let it affect me as much as it can or as much as it used to when I was younger. And I guess step one for me was to just acknowledge that it was a thing, that it was something that happened, that it wasn't a story that I was being told, it wasn't a movie that I watched, that it was actually my life. And I think that's the step, or at least in my opinion, that's the step that people stop at or they get stuck in, where it's very easy once you've accepted it to endlessly talk about the things that have happened to you. It's very easy to constantly play in your head on a loop what was done to you and remembering how horrible it was, remembering the thoughts, the feelings, the smells, the sights associated with whatever time frame you're thinking of. And I had a lot of those. There was many moments in my life, specifically childhood. There's a lot of moments in childhood that I would replay over and over again in my head, kind of like I was on a hamster wheel, because I just needed to make sure that what I remember is reality. And um, a big symptom, I guess, of trauma is actually memory suppression. So as I would work through certain things, months and years down the line, I would remember another aspect of it. So this loop of trying to heal was constantly starting over because I was remembering something that I didn't remember prior. And I didn't really believe that memory suppression was a real thing until it started actually happening to me over and over again. So I'm in this process of trying to heal and beginning to unpack some things, and then a new thing would pop up, and now I have to make sure that I address that. And this whole process of trying to heal started pretty much as soon as Jim died, because Jim is my father, who was an alcoholic, for those who don't know. This process started after he died because he was my biggest stressor in my life, and me and him had one of the worst relationships. Like in my life, me and him had the worst one. So I kind of started the process of healing after he died because I was able to live with my mom. So I was able to talk to her a little bit more freely. And since the main problem was gone, there was nothing new there was very few new things that would come up because of him. So it was easy to start healing from what he did to me because his story ended abruptly, but it ended. So I started to acknowledge all the things that I went through, and I was able to talk about it pretty openly with my mom, which helped a lot. I will say, if it wasn't for my mom being so open and willing to listen to me about what I went through, even things that she thought she knew about already, just letting me restate it, if it wasn't for her letting me have that time and that space to talk about myself and talk about what I went through, I don't know if my healing process would have been as easy to start or to go through. So, talking to somebody that I trusted pretty consistently for years helped a lot. And I will say that as a teenager, because Jim died when a little bit after I was 10. So growing up and becoming a teenager and just going through the teenage emotion, I was in the unpacking phase of healing for a very long time. I didn't really put in the work to do much else other than unpack it. Like, I was kind of putting bits and pieces together of, oh, so because I went through this, maybe this is why I think like that. Like, I didn't really make those connections. And you could call it being a teenager and not really caring. You can call it just being overwhelmed with everything and didn't want to. I don't know what the reason was, but for many years, it was more just me remembering things that happened and trying to talk to my mom and like cross reference time frames of where were you when this happened? Do you remember me telling you this? Do you remember this situation? A lot of like doing detective work. Like, I feel like we needed the thumbtacks on the bulletin board with like red strings attached, like we were in like a cop detective movie. That's what it felt like. We were both trying to piece together this big puzzle without knowing what pieces were missing, without knowing what pieces were in the wrong spot. Like, that's what I spent majority of my teenagehood internally doing, just unpacking everything. And once I was in high school and was going to be graduating soon, I already turned 18 while in high school, so I already had the adult label. Once I started getting closer to being in the more real world, that's when I started to learn and understand that I'm going to be I'm going to need to be the one that makes these changes in my life for myself. And I came to that conclusion because my mom was stuck in the unpacking phase, in my opinion. Um, I feel like past what she already told me and whatever internal struggles she was dealing with, she was stuck in the loop of only really talking about the past and how it affected her in the present, but not really making or trying to make changes that would help her move on from that. And that was the point that I wanted to get past. So she was stuck in phase one of healing, and I was trying to navigate what phase two even is. So I become an adult. I start working right away. I work blue collar. So I started working right away, and I went from being around just my mom for the most part, who was very emotional. Like, she has very strong emotions. Not completely unstable, but there was times where that was the best way to describe her, a little emotionally unstable. And my home life with my mom and others was not perfect. So it overall wasn't the easiest or the best place to try to navigate phase two, which is, course of action, I guess, is the best way to put it. Actually trying to make changes so that I don't continue the cycle of abuse to my future kids, or I don't continue it to myself. So I went and I started to work blue collar. So I went from an emotionally unstable mother that was always my biggest supporter, but hard to talk to sometimes, to a bunch of grown men who kind of suppress that side of them. I've definitely had some deeper conversations with these like tough, rugged blue collar men that most people probably wouldn't expect. But it was a very different environment than my home life. And I didn't have the best role model for a dad. So I was around grown men at my young age of being freshly 18, and everybody looked at me as like the daughter, like the shop daughter, because I was their daughter's age. Or even if the ones that didn't have kids, they knew that I was just so young. This was my first real job. So my supervisor actually was one of the first men in my life that I actually felt like kind of aided me in getting to phase 2 of taking action to heal from what I went through. And it was because I was able to talk to him a little bit about my home life, because I still live with my mom, even though I graduated high school already. I still did live with her, and I lived with a couple other people. And he started to understand like my dynamic with her, and he would start to point out the flaws or the oddness in my relationship with my mom. If it wasn't for him pointing out the flaws between my mother and I, maybe I would have been stuck in this weird loop of the maybe I would have been stuck in the loop of always feeling bad for myself. But because he was able to so gently and politely point out that me and my mom are very different, and it's okay that I'm becoming more of an independent person, that's what made me understand that, oh, like I don't need to do everything that my mom has said or done just because I live with her and I relate to her with a lot of things. It's okay for me to be my own person. And that's when I decided I was going to take more action to feel better about myself and to not let my trauma hold me back. One of the first things I started to implement was actually weightlifting. I wasn't serious when I first started going to the gym. I had like a little history of doing the home workouts, like 2020 COVID. Chloe Ting was my girl. So like I was doing those, and then I was doing Taibo, the Billy Blanks like cardio. Like I was doing things like that at home, but well, I really just think it was because I was bored. I don't really know if I was really in it for the right reasons, but so I started going to the gym and actually lifting weights for the first time. When I first started weightlifting, it mainly started because I needed to get out of the house. I didn't want to spend as much time at home as I was, and I didn't really have a car. And even when I did eventually get a car, I didn't really want to be spending a lot of money on going to like the store or going to the movies or things like that. And the gym was, you just pay the monthly membership and then you can stay there for kind of however long you want. So it was especially helpful when I still had to walk, because I didn't get a car. I didn't get my first car or get my license until around the time I graduated from high school. So I spent majority of my first job uh, needing to get a ride from somebody, and I was using that time to save up for a car. But because I was so desperate to get out of the house, I would just walk to the gym that I went to. So I would work all day, and because I was still in school, I would have homework, and then I would, go to the gym. So a lot of my first year of going to the gym, it was more just a second home, as cringy as that might sound. It kind of was, because I would just do like on the treadmill. I would just walk for a little bit, and I would check out the non intimidating machines and just kind of do whatever for a little bit. And because I had to walk back home, I would always be gone for at least 2 hours. And then I got my car and I was able to drive everywhere. And then I was able to work longer hours. I was able to go to the gym for a longer period of time because I didn't have to worry about walking home at night. And overall, my first year ish at the gym was just spent as enjoying the distance from some family that I lived with. It wasn't that my home life was the worst. It was just very overwhelming. And this is in like 2021, so the lockdown thing is kind of calming down, but there's still certain restrictions. And I wasn't going to school, like, I didn't go into the school at all. So I didn't really get a chance to get out of the house much. And the tensions between my parents were kind of building. And, my sister was also staying home a lot more often because obviously her school was impacted by the pandemic. So I just needed alone time. And then after the year point, I felt a little bit more comfortable with doing actual, you know, I felt more comfortable doing exercises that I purposely picked because I wanted to get stronger. I wasn't doing anything crazy, like I didn't do free weights. I still, for the most part, stuck with machines, but I started to be on the cardio machines less, and I was actually lifting weights more often than not. I would say it took me about 3 to 3.5 years of going to the gym consistently before I actually started to get serious about training. Like my mindset went from I'm working out to I'm training. And what that meant for me was I started to include free weights into my workout routine. I was doing the big three squat, bench, deadlift more consistently. And I actually paid attention to form, technique, the nitty gritty of somebody that has a serious interest in weightlifting. Because prior to that, like, I definitely searched up exercises and how to do them, but I didn't really care to use free weights yet. So as far as like strict form for heavy compound exercises, I didn't really do. About 3.5 years in, that changed. And ever since now, almost 2 years ago, I take weightlifting and training very seriously. Like I have my own program that I follow. I didn't buy it from anybody, and I don't have a personal trainer or anything like that. But I have done enough trial and error where I'm pretty comfortable with the type of split that I have. I pay attention and I purposely pick exercises that will help me grow or get stronger in a particular body part or region. And I am the type to prop my phone up on a water bottle just so I can see my form a little bit better. And I would say starting to take weightlifting more seriously even furthered my healing process because at first I looked to the gym as just an escape from my home life, but then my home life changed because I did eventually move out. And instead of looking at the gym as a place to escape from my home life, it turned into a place where I can better myself. So instead of using it as just like a coping skill, which it still is, but my mindset shifted from this is just a coping skill to this is just a part of my lifestyle. And it was a really crucial pivot for me because I was always a bigger kid. I always struggled with my weight. Having such a strong foundation of weightlifting has not only helped me feel better, but because I try to adjust my diet and I try to include more protein and more micronutrients into my diet, even if my weight stays relatively the same, I notice physical changes in how my body looks. So I get the benefits of the dopamine rush from exercise making me feel better, but then when I look in the mirror, I feel like I look better. And just that constant positive reinforcement loop of looking and feeling better from exercise and from weightlifting specifically, it helped me feel at peace with myself, and it helped me, like most people feel when they start working out, feel more confident in myself. And that made my healing process kind of fly by, because once I felt at peace with how I am and what I looked like and navigating the gym space, which is very male dominated, it made everything else a little bit easier, because if I can push myself physically when I'm the only one that knows how hard I'm pushing myself, then I can do anything. And it also made me more confident in other aspects of my life. Like I said, that confidence from pushing yourself really hard in just an exercise made me feel more confident in a lot of other areas. So, definitely leaning into learning what healthy is in a broad sense, and then for me specifically, what healthy habits look like for me in my day to day life was a big part of the healing process. And I think why it was such a big part of the healing process was because I definitely grew up a little bit neglected, I guess. Looking back at old pictures of myself when I was a kid, it's like, I don't understand why more people weren't concerned about my weight. And I remember how I acted in the past. And if my sister or a younger family member of mine was acting the way I was acting, I would be more concerned. So, in a way, me trying to instill these healthy habits in my life now, I'm taking care of the little girl that didn't get taken care of when I was younger. So, it's really nice to be able to tell myself and show myself that I deserve to be taken care of properly. And now that's in my control, I can, to the best of my abilities, make sure that I have the most amount of energy I could ever imagine. So that was the start of the healing phase for me. Because of the confidence overlap that I was gaining from training, it overall made me a better communicator, especially with my boyfriend. Because we're a couple, couples definitely fight and have their off days with each other. But I noticed that because I was changing my mindset regarding weightlifting, it forced me to change my mindset about a lot of other things, like how I would handle different situations started to change because that one aspect of my life, weightlifting, also started to change. So I was able to, and he was too, like as a team, we were both able to work through our different issues with a little bit more grace than what I feel like we handled them with in the past. And you could say it's also because we got older, but I think a big part of it had to do with just how I was able to grow as a person because I was actively working on healing myself. Another thing that helped me with healing was actually seeking out professional help and also meeting people that had a similar upbringing to me, or just meeting people that had current addicts in their life and being able to really connect and talk to them. When it came down to seeking out professional help, I basically just got to a point where I felt like therapy of some sort would be beneficial for me. Because, I kind of yap a lot, as you could probably tell by the current podcast you are listening to. So I decided to get a therapist, and I really enjoyed her. She was actually, I'm Christian, and she is a Christian based therapist. So it was really nice being able to find somebody that on that level we connected. And I didn't really know how it was gonna work, like how she was gonna like intertwine it, because part of the advertising was that it was a Christian counseling service. So I was curious on how much they would intertwine the therapy talk with possible religious beliefs, the Bible, things like that. And I found her really insightful and really helpful. And in my only one prior experience of talking to a therapist when I was a kid, I didn't feel that same connection as I did with my current therapist. And then it's not that I grew out of her, but we met up again at one point, and she basically said that some of the things that I was dealing with was out of her scope of expertise, and she didn't feel comfortable kind of just like dragging me along to get money when she knew that I needed somebody a little bit more qualified, and then when I worked with that other person I could always go back to her. So I eventually did a more intensive form of therapy. I did IOP, which is an intensive outpatient therapy. So it was a group therapy setting, but I was able to work full time, and I just had to do Zoom meetings 3 times a week with a group, and then I also had a one-on-one therapist. And this was all provided through a separate mental health facility. And because this was a mental health facility, they had therapists and specialists of every sort. So I was able to talk to people specifically about what I went through and just what I was going through. And even though there was parts of it where I didn't feel like it was helpful or I didn't really relate to what the topic was, I guess, I ended up coming out of it and graduating the program much more calm than what I was before the program. Because it wasn't just meetings and, talking to a bunch of adults. We always did activities with the lesson, and they always encouraged, like, trying to finish a lesson and maybe doing it as homework. And your one on one therapist would typically give you an assignment that she or he would want you to complete by the next week. So a lot of the activities I felt were very well like curated for what exactly I was dealing with. So therapy, seeking out actual mental help, mental health help and support for the problem areas that I was dealing with, and just seriously considering and taking care of myself, what however way I found fit, were kind of the foundational start for how I started to heal. And I saved the best for last, but I also started to lean into my faith more. Now, I don't want to get preachy, so I won't really go too much in detail about like my like testimonial or anything like that. But I will just say that I struggled a lot with my relationship to God, and it took me a long time to more come back around to my faith. And it wasn't because anything, like, I was never the type of person like this is all God's fault or anything like that. It was just, I don't know, I just had a phase of not really prioritizing it. But I decided to start prioritizing it a little bit more in my life. And I can say that it did bring me more peace. However, whatever you would define as peace in a person's soul, that's what it brought me. So, accompanied with me actually, taking care of myself and exercising and trying to eat better, and also seeking out support from professionals and also support groups. My faith was not only the foundation, but it was also like the little cherry on top that made everything come together. And I don't want to say lastly, because I don't feel like I will ever get out of the healing phase, which is fine because I think the process of always trying to, not always trying to, I think the process of continuously working on yourself is not a bad thing. Like, it's okay to be content with your life, but it's also okay to know what your weak points are and to be active in trying to resolve those weak points. So, I don't want to say that I'll ever move on to another phase where I'm not healing, but I'm kind of teetering the line between the healing phase and the this is now who I am. Like I kind of referenced before that weightlifting was just a part of my lifestyle now, and which it is, but I want to be able to take it further and I want to be able to make it better, which is why it's still in the healing phase, because it's something that I know I need to actively keep up on to feel good. And same thing with the the mental health support, and same thing with faith. Like those are all things I actively want to work on. But at the same time, I am happy with how far I've come with all three of those things. So I'm also at a I have also reached a place where I'm content with the person that I turned out to be, while also knowing that it's always possible to grow and learn more as a person. And especially as with age, it's normal. I don't think anybody when they're 30 is the same person as when they're 20. And if you are, then you probably missed out on a couple life lessons, in my opinion. So, phase three for me is being content with the person that I am. And I can safely say that, at least at the moment, I am content with who I am. I am at peace with what I went through. And even though if I think about something too long, it can make me upset, it wouldn't send me into the same spirals it used to send me. I am also comfortable with the fact that I have to be uncomfortable to grow and change. Thank you for listening to Surrounded by Addicts. Remember to take life one day at a time and to enjoy the little things in life. Stay tuned for the next episode.